I have the honor and privilege to introduce Grand Chief Stewart Philip. He served as president of the Union of BC Chiefs for 14 years. In October 2008, Grand Chief Stewart Philip concluded his 4th consecutive term as Chief of Penticton Band after having served the band as chief for 14 years. In addition, he served as an elected band councillor for a 10-year period and continues to serve as the chair of the Okanagan Nation Alliance. In October 2006, the Okanagan Nation, led by the elders of the Penticton Band, acknowledged his lifetime commitment to the defense of Indigenous people title and rights by bestowing on him and his family the rare honor title of Grand Chief. He has taken an active role in the defense of Aboriginal title and rights by readily offering support to Native communities in need. He has seen firsthand the impact of fish farms in the Broughton Archipelago, lobbied on Parliament Hill to defeat the First Nations Governance Act, worked with elders of Treaty 8 against oil and gas development in the Peace River area, burned referendum ballots with fellow chiefs in protest, and stood in the steps of the BC legislature with 3,000 other people united under the Title and Rights Alliance banner. So it gives me great pleasure, and would you join me in welcoming to the podium Grand Chief Stewart Philip.
Wai Haskahalt, Piscina Xil, and Chaya Squeeze, Asiut. Good day, my friends and relatives. My traditional name that I carry with an enormous amount of pride is Asiut, and it was a name that was given to me in the aftermath of the so-called Oka crisis in 1990. And the Mohawk people sponsored an appreciation tour, and they traveled all across Turtle Island, went into the communities that supported them during the standoff. And as you may recall, there were more troops at Ganasatagi and Ganawagi than were deployed in the Gulf War. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of RCMP and Sûreté de Quebec. And that standoff went for, I believe, 73 days. And it totally galvanized our people across this country from sea to sea to sea. And we had this huge celebration. The love of my life, the center of my universe, Joan, who I always point out I'm her husband, she's not my wife, organized the feast, the banquet. And midway through that entire celebration, I was called out and stood up, as they say in our world, and I was given the name. And our elders said that after witnessing that incredible, terrifying ordeal of the Mohawk crisis, that we had traveled all across the country and went to many, many different communities that were sponsoring solidarity blockades in support of the Haudenosaunee people. And that's where I first met Chief Gary John. I remember I had the honor of being arrested in his community. Very crafty leaders over there in Statlium territory. A political strategy of importing the arrestees. But I remember hearing Gary John as a young man, and Oka was almost 23 years ago now. I remember hearing him speaking in his community hall, and I knew that that he was destined to become a very important leader of his community and his nation and our people. And And I just want to say to Chief John that I really admire and commend him for being part of such an important organization as the Council of Canadians. I remember when Gary first told me he was on the board, one of my eyebrows went up, and you know, now I know and understand that Gary was certainly ahead of us in his thinking in terms of knowing and understanding the struggle that we're involved in is an international struggle, it's a national struggle, and it's going to take all of us united to be able to push back on those multitude of agendas that seek to oppress our peoples. I also had the honor of serving, so to speak, with Chief John during the Mi'kmaq when they went out and asserted their sovereign right to the lobster fishery. Juggage is the word for lobster. And not surprisingly, Gary was there, and many of our leaders from across the country answered that clarion call and went over and were out on the boats and were facing off with DFO. And the Canadian Armed Forces astonishingly had I think it's called an AWAC aircraft, circle the community from daylight, from dawn till dark in an orbit. It must have cost $1 gazillion. They would buzz the community periodically with one of their military aircraft, and they had a Coast Guard cutter out there just cruising back and forth. And again, there were hundreds and hundreds of police, RCMP, and DFO officers, and it was a real ugly, nasty confrontation. I just want to briefly as possible talk about I've been involved in the affairs of our people for I would suspect somewhere around 36, 37 years. And when I first was involved, it was during the time of the standoff, the armed standoff in Wounded Knee at Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And those were interesting times for those of us in this room that remember those times. And I know there are many people in this room that remember those glorious days. It was during the time of the Civil Rights Movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement, the peace movement, and it was a time that we were able to enjoy music that we could actually hear the lyrics and the lyrics made sense, and they talked about the lyrics talked about love, talked about brotherly love and defending the land and those things, and we knew and understood, and we're very good at creating those mass movements back in those days. And people didn't have a problem with going out and participating in mass demonstrations in many ways for the express purpose of getting arrested. And there were hundreds and thousands of arrests, and the police came out with tear gas and dogs, and many people lost their lives in those riots and those struggles. But if it weren't for those people, the rights that were brought forward through legislation in terms of civil rights and a lot of the advances that we made as a result of that struggle wouldn't be in evidence today. And I long quite often for those times. In our world, it was the American Indian movement, and we were swept up in red power. And I immediately went out and bought myself a Billy Jack hat, and I had a red headband on it, and a feather, and sunglasses, and a fatigue jacket. There was no camo in those days. It was just olive drab color, and our people came together from all across Turtle Island, and they were young people, and they were greatly inspired, and they reached out to our elders and our spiritual leaders. And the whole purpose of Red Power was to protect Mother Earth. And there were alliances between the indigenous peoples and the people of the earth. And I remember going to a lot of anti-nuclear events and meeting all kinds of alliances across North America. And it was just a few days ago that Russell Means passed away, who was one of the iconic leaders back in those days, and represented that spirit of resistance. And we all looked up to him, and he was a very dynamic, articulate, intelligent, well-spoken leader. And we took our inspiration from that style of leadership. And I think that there is a huge demand for that type of leadership today. That one of the primary and fundamental responsibilities of leadership is to inspire those that take the time out of their lives to support these very important issues. And our leaders need to have that sense of compassion and know and understand that we need a movement, we need a mass movement, and we can't get involved in these petty politics of our organizations and the cliquishness and the backbiting and the infighting and I dare say from our side of the gender equation there, the egos and all of those things, because they really take the energy out of any movement and undermine the movement, and we need to surrender. We need to surrender to the common good, and that's what I see happening. I am absolutely encouraged of the developments that have taken place in the last few years, not only here in Turtle Island, North America, but globally, with respect to the beginnings of a mobilization of ordinary people. I had the opportunity to attend an event not too long ago, a shout out against mining injustices, and it brought people together from Mexico, Central America, South America, young people, leaders, the most courageous people I've ever had the honor of meeting in my life. And down there, the struggle is absolutely, brutally real. And many of those people are murdered, they're kidnapped in the middle of the night, they're tortured, they go missing, and yet they continue the struggle. A lot of those mining companies, the majority of those mining companies are right here in British Columbia, downtown Vancouver. And those are the very companies that contribute heavily to both the Harper government and the former Campbell and now the Clark government here in British Columbia. And I was never so moved by the stories I heard over the course of that weekend from those young people. And the thing that I wanted most in the world at that point was to be able to speak Spanish. We had those translators, and after being with those delegates for the course of the weekend, feeling so comfortable with the language and that, I found that those earphones were starting to impair my hearing, and I would take them out thinking that I could hear better with And of course, when I took them out, I couldn't understand what they were saying. But I really admire those people that we met, and it makes me realize that the solidarity that we talk about has to be real, and we have to lend our support to those people that are absolutely on the front line of this struggle. For our people, this whole notion of austerity is hundreds and hundreds of years old. And as I heard our brother here from the UK talk about a general strike, on the one hand, it just totally excited me. But then I thought, we're all unemployed. Like, there's massive unemployment in our Aboriginal and Indigenous communities, and there always has been. But I'm sure that we'll find a way to lend our support. The Harper government in particular is, not surprisingly, what I consider a Christian fundamentalist government that is very, very much obsessed with obliterating the communality of Indigenous rights, particularly Indigenous land rights. And they have a very insidious legislative agenda that's designed to do away with our Indigenous land rights, because we are the ones that stand in between the aspirations of the Harper government of Stephen Harper becoming an international world energy czar. And I know there's a lot of dialogue and discussion about Indigenous land rights are internationally recognized rights through the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There was the hard work of Indigenous peoples leaders that have come before us for over 20 years that was finally embraced by the majority of countries in the UN. It's interesting to note, though, there was a significant number of countries that abstained from that vote. And needless to say, there was large populations of Indigenous people in their countries. And of course, the usual suspects opposed it, Canada being the last holdout. And that is the true face of what the Harper government represents. Again, knowing that our Indigenous land rights are absolutely real and give us the opportunity to be able to push back on such insidious, insane projects as the Northern Gateway Enbridge pipeline proposal, the expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline, this new Spectra line that was just announced, and all of these schemes of the Harper government. And now, of course, we have the trade agreements that, on the one hand, the Harper government is chastising and involved in a multi-billion dollar smear campaign. The true heart of the Harper government is their communications. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars in communications, and we are portrayed as being corrupt. And the fact that we are portrayed as being the lazy, slovenly beneficiaries of billions of dollars of public money that we have no right to have, and that our leaders are somehow squandering this money and so on and so forth. The Attawapiskat situation is a prime example of the Harper ideology, where that community was in such dire straits and their people living outside, living in lean-tos and tents, that they had to reach out to the Red Cross and declare a state of emergency. The first thing the Harper government did was attack the community. They attacked the leadership. They casted dispersions and actually put the community into third-party management. The chief of that community, not surprisingly, an incredibly strong leader, was a woman, Teresa Spence, and she stood up to those attacks and actually took the Harper government to court, to federal court. The court found that the government was totally wrong in imposing third-party management. But nonetheless, the Harper government continues its relentless campaign against our people for those very reasons that I outlined, vis-a-vis our constitutional and legal rights with respect to the lands and resources within our territories. And so what needs to happen, and I know I'm singing to the choir here, but we have to unite our voices. We have to come together. And I I really appreciated the questions and the responses of what I heard here this morning. In terms of organized labor, we actually signed a memorandum of understanding with organized labor. We were at the BC Fed Annual General Assembly. There were hundreds and hundreds of delegates there, and just lots of energy, and we were up at the front table signing off on the MOU, and we had one luncheon, I believe, at a restaurant in downtown Vancouver, and that was pretty much it. And I have a lot of respect. I have deep respect for organized labor and everything that organized labor represents. But the relationship has to be a little more robust. It has to be a little closer. You can't feel the love at that great distance. I remember those wonderful rallies we had in front of the ledge right after the Campbell government was elected. And I remember there was 25,000, 30,000 people in front of the ledge. And I remember the lawn just turned to mud, absolute mud. And I remember standing on a very small incline in that crush of people. And the BC Fed had organized that mass rally, and just standing in one place, slowly sliding backwards. That's how muddy it was. But it was a glorious day. It was a fantastic day. And of course, the police always downsize their public estimation of what the crowds are, because they don't want to encourage us to continue doing that. In, I believe it was 2004, our people, under an umbrella of the Title and Rights Alliance, did a similar rally for just Indigenous peoples. And I think we had somewhere in excess of 3,000 people. And we networked and organized this event, and pushing back on the Campbell Agenda. And one of our chiefs, a woman, had a dream. And she had this dream of thousands of Indigenous people in front of the legislature wearing red. And so she shared that during the planning, and so we all showed up wearing red T-shirts. And I would like to say, with an enormous sense of pride, I have 4 adult sons and 2 daughters, and both of my daughters are teachers. And I really followed that last debate where the teachers were meeting, and the strike and everything. And my youngest daughter designed the T-shirts with a eagle, head of an eagle, and very coveted items now. But we were out in front of the ledge there, and we had our elders waiting for us, and we had lawn chairs set out. And we marched across the Johnson Street Bridge and down the waterfront and onto the lawn of the ledge. And we had our people in regalia and the drummers. And it was an absolutely incredible day. And soon as we came into sight, our elders just broke down. And they just cried to see that mobilization, that pride, that strength and power of our people coming up onto the steps. And we had our speakers talk. One of those speakers was Gujau from the Haida. And I just want to say that I had the honor of spending 3 days up in Haida Gwaii just about 2 weeks ago. I was invited to do the keynote for their House of Assembly. And I just want everyone in this room to know it was not the Council of Haida Nation that was involved in that event where the filings went into the ocean. It was a smaller group, and Gujau was incredibly upset about the fact that somehow the protocols had been breached to allow for that to happen. So Gujao is a very, very important leader in our world, and is an incredibly unifying force. They have their own proud history of standing up at Mears Island and pushing back on the logging. And everything that's being talked about here is what happened in Haida Gwaii, where Gujao knew and understand it was not an indigenous issue alone, solely, that it was all of the good people that had made their homes in Haida Gwaii and were raising their families there and had done so for generations and were relying on the very same ocean and sea for their livelihood and for the tourism industry. And they all came together and they slashed the annual allowable cut. And the Haida people have the only real control over their territory in spite of all the legislative constraints. So I can feel Mr. John creeping in on me here. I can feel that Statlium presence there. Yeah. So, you know, the problems are clear. They're real problems. They're creating havoc and great tragedy in our communities, and certainly the media reports on the escalation and epidemic of suicides of our young people who reach that point where they're in their view there's no hope, and they end their lives. They just want it to end. And the housing and the health issues in our communities and the number of homeless of Aboriginal people on the streets of the large cities, we're definitely the canary in the mine shaft. So we have every motivation and reason to be part of this family in this room. And I want to thank you in closing for inviting me into your house. I want to acknowledge Chief Doug White of Nanaimo. He's one of my colleagues, and I never got to hear him speak last night, but he's very passionate, and he understands. He's a lawyer, and he has a deep anger within him with the injustices vis-a-vis what's going on in his country. I want to acknowledge Maud Barlow, who started many, many years ago as a single flame, a candle in a very, very dark world. And as time has went on, there are more and more candles arising on all of the continents, and the Council of Canadians' presence is known in so many different places and represents that hope that helps to inspire the human spirit and mobilize us. Joan and I have been blessed with 13 grandchildren. The most precious thing that you can ever conceive of, and I know there are grandparents in the room. And everything that we do, Joan was with me when we were in front of the ledge on Monday, and both Joan and I had these armbands on. We were prepared to get arrested in that action that took place on Monday, because as Maud has pointed out, this is really about our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren. And the work that we do now will determine the world that they grow up in. And so if it takes going out and in a very mass way, all of us getting arrested, then that's what we have to be prepared to do. There is no shame. There are many, many leaders throughout history that spent a lot of time being arrested by the authorities and being beaten, and yet they continued their quest. And we know who those people are. And we have to know and understand we are the ones we've been waiting for. And we are the only thing that our grandchildren can rely on for their future. And we have to rise to that challenge. And we have to do it together as brothers and sisters. And I know that I see that happening, and it will continue to to intensify. I went to the BC Wildlife Federation Annual General Assembly a few months ago up in Courtenay. The last time I ever entered their room was with George Manuel a very long time ago, and it was very, very hostile. And Joan and I joined the BC Fed, the BC Wildlife Federation, and because they're concerned about the crash of the moose population because of the clear cuts. Many of the issues are the same. So just in closing, I want you to know that I've decided I'm going to, and Joan will join the Council of Canadians and become part of your family and part of that flow of that important information. I think we have to firstly pick the fight. We've been quiet too long. We've been polite too long. Governments have gotten a free ride. We have to pick the fight, and then we have to win that fight, and I know we will. Why? Lim limt.